Welcome to the debrief. Our top stories this morning focus on that latest mass shooting in the United States, a gunman entering a synagogue in Pittsburgh. 11 people are dead. We will have the latest on the victims, the gunman, and the investigation. First, here are your headlines.
U.S. military has begun delivering equipment to the southern border to guard against the possibility that thousands of migrants may try to get into the U.S. illegally. The caravan is still hundreds of miles from the border. President Trump has called to congratulate Brazil's new president-elect after Jair Bolsonaro's election victory. The former Army captain won despite being stabbed while campaigning last month. Germany's chancellor says this term will be her last. Angela Merkel has held the post since 2005. Her current term runs out in 3 years, but Merkel says she'll step down as leader of her political party by the end of this year. And the Commerce Department says consumer spending was up 0.3% in September. A man who fell about 50 feet down an Arizona mine shaft and lived to tell about it is talking about his ordeal.
I thought I was going to die. And so a lot of things were going through my head, and if I stayed down there, I knew I was going to die.
Waddell was rescued after 2 days.
And good morning, everyone. We begin with the latest on that mass shooting in Pittsburgh. This morning, the alleged shooter faces 29 charges, that is, 22 of which make him eligible for the death penalty. Matt Gutman has the details on all of that. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, Diane, we're actually outside the Allegheny General Hospital where Robert Bowers, the shooter, is being treated for multiple gunshot wounds in a secure ward somewhere in that hospital behind me. You can see all those people lining up. It's been going like this for hours. They're trying to get into the hospital, but because of the added security measures, it's taking longer for anybody to try to gain entrance. There are metal detectors and added security guards and police inside. Now, what we know about Bowers is that in person, he was a ghost. On social media, he was a demon. We met one of his neighbors last night, Chris Hall, the guy who lives right next to him, and he said that Bowers lived there for 18 months, and in 18 months, he never once opened the blinds, never once opened the shades. He used to wave hello to his neighbors, but never spoke to them. In 18 months of living in that same apartment, he never once had a guest over. And that's what law enforcement is finding also, that this man was a cipher, a mystery. He had no criminal history. He apparently bought his weapons legally, at least the 4 initially, according to preliminary investigations from the ATF. He bought those 4 weapons that he used at the Tree of Life synagogue legally. He has no known family. He has no real friends to speak of that we've been able to find, certainly nobody who's been willing to come out and talk about him. And he lived alone. No bumper stickers, nothing to hint at his alleged anti-Semitic obsession, except for his traffic online. And there you see these hate-filled messages that he posted, especially on what calls itself a free speech website or social media group called Gab, where a lot of people seem to vent their hatred towards others. There's a tremendous amount of xenophobia on those social media platforms. And there, he basically telegraphed that he was going to do something horrific, saying, "Screw your optics, I'm going in one of those posts." Now, law enforcement is continuing to look at him intensely. He has his first court appearance, probably going to be in his hospital ward since he is still recovering from those injuries. He faces 29 federal charges, including for murder and for hate crimes. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions says he wants him to face the death penalty. We'll know more about that a little bit later today. Now, an interesting side note about this hospital and where we are and the people who have been treating Robert Bowers. We're told from the president of the hospital that the first 3 people who saw him and helped save Robert Bowers' life, they were Jews. The president of that hospital that I just spoke about, not only Jewish, but apparently his family went to the Tree of Life synagogue as well. So it's amazing how everything here in this very small town of Pittsburgh is intertwined and interconnected. And still, what's incredible to me is that people at this hospital are fulfilling the Hippocratic Oath and treating Robert Bowers just as they would any other patient, even though he is the cause for what the mayor said is the darkest day in Pittsburgh's history. Anyway, back to you, Diane.
Yeah, quite a bit of irony there. Matt Gutman for us from Pittsburgh. Matt, thanks. We also, of course, are remembering the 11 people who lost their lives in that massacre. Thousands gathered for memorial last night. The mayor called it the city's, quote, darkest hour. Ariel Reshev has a look at that side of the story. Ariel?
Good morning to you, Diane. We're here at the Tree of Life Synagogue. This is where that horrific tragedy occurred, and I have to say it is surreal to juxtapose the memorials that you see over my left-hand side with the crime and mobile teams, the investigators, the ambulances that you would see over my right-hand side if we moved our camera. This is another example of people being targeted in a house of worship. Unfortunately, we've covered these kinds of stories before, but this is the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in the history of the United States. And of course, today, this community is honoring and remembering those 11 victims. I'm going to show you the memorial that's set up behind me. You can see the brothers, Cecil and David Rosenthal. We spoke, even before we knew their names, before they were made public, we spoke with some of their friends and family who told us they were two men with special needs who were so dedicated to the Jewish community and to the community at large. They came into this house of worship every Saturday. It was like waking up in the morning, part of their morning routine. They would hand out the prayer books, they would hand out the prayer shawls, and everyone in this community knew them by name, by face, and everyone greeted them with a smile because they said these two brothers were jovial and happy and the purest of souls, and that's what makes this tragedy so very senseless. I also want to pan over. We have people paying their respects right now, but you see the name of Rose Mallinger. She was 97 years old, a Holocaust survivor. You have the name of the Simons, who were married 60 years ago inside this very synagogue. So you can imagine the trauma and the intense pain that this community is grappling with right now. And as is traditional in Jewish law, we will now be preparing for the funerals of these 11 innocent victims, ages 54 to 97. Gunned down senselessly inside of the shul, the synagogue behind us. As you mentioned, there was that vigil last night. We had our World News Tonight live shot location there. We were speaking to David live, and I have to tell you, it was incredibly powerful. The entire community came out in droves. It was a diverse community. It was people of all walks of life, of all faiths coming together. And as the rabbi beautifully stated, this was not an attack just on the Jewish community. This was an attack on Americans and Americans' way of life, an American way of life. To desecrate a holy site like this, anyone out there can relate to this feeling. Anyone going to church on a Sunday, anyone going to synagogue on a Saturday, anyone walking into a mosque can imagine their friends and family in the very same position. That vigil was so well attended that the hall where it was held was overflowing with people. They flowed into the hallways and then spilled out the doors where we were standing out in the freezing cold rain. It was a downpour during our World News Tonight hit last night with David, and people were standing there shoulder to shoulder, crying, singing, praying. It was one of the more powerful and beautiful experiences that I've had as a journalist. It left a lasting impression on me, Diane.
That certainly says a lot, Ariel. We know the community, if nothing else, has shown quite an outpouring of support. We know that the arena where the Pittsburgh Penguins normally play hockey instead of hockey, there was a massive blood drive being conducted there. People just lining up, extending, so far back to try to give blood and help the people in any way they can. And I know the Steelers also paid tribute to the victims as well.
They did, Diane, and I just have to say this. They panned the crowd last night. All of the sports teams and some of the sports celebrities have weighed in on this and are also sending their condolences and expressing solidarity with the community here in Squirrel Hill. But there was a sign held up by someone in the crowd last night that said, "Hatred can't weaken a city of steel." That is the resilience of this community, and we talk about this in so many communities that we unfortunately cover when there's a situation of tragedy. But in our personal experience, being here on the ground in Squirrel Hill and in the Pittsburgh community, this is one of the warmest places that we have ever been. I think David mentioned it last night on World News, how sometimes we come into these communities and we want to tread very lightly on their feelings and in the time of tragedy. And we have been welcomed. We have been talked to proactively. There have been members of the community who want to talk about these beautiful souls who lost their lives here. And that is something that has really left, like I said, a lasting impression on us. And this is stretched across the globe, Diane. We know that the Eiffel Tower went dark in Paris in solidarity with what's happened here, or in an expression of grief across the globe. We know that the Tel Aviv Municipal Building flashed or was aglow with the American flag. This has affected the global community. The Jewish organizations have sent a lot of their representatives here to Pittsburgh, and we know also interfaith leaders have also expressed their solidarity as well, Diane. So This is not just a tragedy that hits home for the Jewish community, it hits home for everybody.
It does indeed, and in the wake of all this division, we are seeing a show of solidarity in the wake of all this. Ariel Reshev, great reporting. We appreciate it. Thank you. And now let's get some analysis on the shooting. For that, we go to John Cohen, the former acting undersecretary at the Department of Homeland Security. John, you know, it's hard to ignore the fact that this mass shooting comes just days after these suspicious packages were sent through the mail to several targets. Is there anything that we should be reading into that, the fact that these two events happened so close together?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. These two incidents, these two circumstances are a stark illustration of the threat that now faces this country. It's a threat that really is a convergence of two trends. One, for the last 5 years, we've seen a steady increase in mass casualty attacks targeting houses of worship, schools, movie theaters, other locations that are open to the public by disaffected, violence-prone individuals who have behavioral or mental health issues, who self-connect with some ideological cause, primarily through their consuming of material on the internet or through social media. They then use that ideological or political cause as the justification to commit mass murder or some other violent act. What we are also seeing, however, though, is that the increasing hostile nature of our political discourse and the demonization of political opponents, you know, calling them evil, corrupt, enemies of the country. In many cases, that rhetoric, which is also being amplified on social media, is inspiring these same disaffected people, much like the videos of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or other extremist groups. So law enforcement is very concerned that there's so much material that's out there that's impacting this vulnerable part of our population, these people who are very much like that which was described earlier by Matt on the Pittsburgh shooter, that we're going to see more of these types of attacks.
So, John, what do you do? I mean, we live in a country that so highly values free speech, and for so many good reasons, and yet we're hearing that, you know, divisive speech in many ways is inciting this kind of attack. If that's true, then what do you do about it?
Well, you first have to recognize the problem, and I think one of the challenges we're facing right now is that notwithstanding a lot of work that's been done by the FBI and others in law enforcement to understand these attacks and to develop strategies for preventing these attacks, it really just has not been a national priority for us to build a consistent level of capability across the country. There are some jurisdictions that have worked to educate the public about the warning signs, both those that might be exhibited in the physical world and those that may be exhibited on social media or the internet, and they've worked to improve their ability to assess the risk posed by individuals that come to their attention and intervene. Just several weeks back, high school in the D.C. suburbs averted a school shooting because students saw disturbing posts on Instagram. They contacted the school resource officer, the police department, assessed the risk posed by the individual, found he had acquired weapons, believed he was getting ready to conduct an attack, and they were able to take steps to stop it. So we know what we need to do in order to stop these attacks, but unfortunately, as a law enforcement person, it's incredibly frustrating that there really has not been the political will in this country to confront this threat.
So what do you do? I mean, from a political standpoint, then, what's the argument that you think needs to be made in order to get them to take action?
A strong message needs to be sent to people who are in government, who are elected into government, or who are running for office, that their words, while they may energize their political base, may also be inspiring the next mass casualty attacker. People should be passionate in expressing their political views. Part of what makes this country great is the healthy discourse that occurs as part of our political process. But unfortunately, we are living in a time when the language that's used, while again effective politically may also serve to inspire those disaffected, violence-prone individuals who are the population or the subset of our population that are conducting these attacks.
All right, well, we certainly have a lot of work to do. John Cohen, former acting undersecretary of the Department of Homeland Security. We appreciate it, John. Thanks.
Nice being with you.
And one last note on the shooting. You heard Ariel and I talking about that blood drive. We actually have our affiliate reporter, Bob Mayo, was there outside the Pittsburgh Penguins arena as that was going on. We just wanted to give you a quick look at that.
Diane, we're here inside Pittsburgh's PPG Paints Arena. You can see that the blood drive is underway, and this is happening here at the home of the Pittsburgh Penguins, the 5-time Stanley Cup champs. They offered this facility to facilitate this donation. They're calling this the Stronger Than Hate blood drive in response to the massive shootings at the synagogue. This donation process can take typically an hour. Because of the turnout here, it's taking longer than that. Folks have to fill out a medical questionnaire here online. They are then back in this private area screened medically to confirm that they're in shape to be able to donate blood. Over here we have folks who are waiting. They've already gone through that process, and they will, from here, go into this area to actually donate blood. The Penguins making this area available as a result of the strong turnout that they had over the weekend. They had so many people donating blood over the weekend, they had to turn them away. This will be continuing through the day, Diane.
All right, Bob Mayo there from our affiliate in Pittsburgh. Bob, we appreciate it. And now we want to get to the White House, where President Trump is also reacting to the shooting. He called it an act of pure evil, but then also ended up in a bit of a debate with the mayor of Pittsburgh over what to do about it. Karen Travers is outside the White House with the latest on that. Karen?
Diane, in some of his first comments on the shooting on Saturday, the president was talking about changing gun laws. And the president went where we've seen him go before after a shooting rampage. The president noted that there were no armed security guards in the synagogue that day and said perhaps they should have them there, that the results would have been better if there were armed security. The mayor of Pittsburgh said that this is not the answer to this problem by having synagogues armed. He said we should try to stop irrational behavior from happening at the forefront. So a bit of a debate there, but it has been striking that there hasn't been a conversation really about gun control policy in the wake of this. There's just so many other layers to this tragedy. And the president, as you say, called it an anti-Semitic act. And he also said it was an act of pure evil, condemning it in very strong terms on Saturday, but also, Diane, very quickly saying that the level of hatred right now in this country and the anger that is simmering across the states, he says that's in large part to the media and fake reporting and fake news.
All right. And Karen, in terms of whether or not he will go to Pittsburgh, I know he has a very busy political travel schedule with the midterms so close. So what's the verdict on that?
Right now, there's nothing announced yet, Diane, but the president said he wanted to go to Pittsburgh, but it's not clear exactly where he'll go, what he'll do there, who he will meet with. But he did say it's something he would like to do. The president, as you say, has a very, very busy campaign schedule starting in the middle of this week. He will be out on the road almost every day doing nearly a dozen rallies between now and the midterms. The president, of course, did not cancel an event in Illinois on Saturday night that took place just hours after that shooting. He said he had considered whether or not to cancel it, but he said we can't let evil stop our schedules. And he still kept on with that. And as you've heard in some of those quotes, it was classic Trump at a rally, still doing the usual hits, still revving up his supporters, with now just 8 days to go until the midterms.
All right, Karen Travers from the White House. Karen, thanks. And now we want to get to the latest on the investigation into those suspicious packages. The suspect heads to court today, and we have some exclusive video of him on the morning of his arrest. Victor Oquendo has the details on that. Victor, there's a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the video. What are we seeing?
Well, we're actually seeing Cesar Sayoc the morning of his arrest. But quickly, before we get to that, we'll tell you what's happening here today right behind me. That suspect expected right here at court at 2 o'clock, the federal courthouse in downtown Miami, for his initial appearance. This is not an arraignment. There will be no plea. It's expected to be fairly quick. However, it is the beginning of a very long process. The big question today is, when will Sayoc be moved to New York, where this case will be handled? Let's show you that video now. The 56-year-old seen here at a South Florida strip club the morning of his arrest, casually chatting with co-workers, eating his meal, rifling through stacks of papers. And it was just 6 hours later that Sayoc would be arrested by the FBI at an AutoZone in Plantation, Florida. Over the course of the last week, 14 explosive devices were sent to prominent Democrats, including President Obama and Secretary Clinton, culminating with Sayoc's arrest on Friday. Law enforcement officials believe that Sayoc's van, covered in political posters and stickers, may have been the makeshift workshop where he constructed all of those devices. In the end, though, it was a sole fingerprint on the device that he allegedly mailed to Congresswoman Maxine Waters that led investigators to their suspect. Diane?
And Victor, we're hearing that his family is now speaking out. What are they saying?
Well, in an interview with the New York Times, Cesar Sayoc's sister said, thank God he hasn't hurt anybody, and they are now urging him to seek mental and legal help.
All right, Victor Kendo, we appreciate the report. Thank you. Let's go over to Indonesia now, where a passenger plane with 189 people on board crashed into the Sea of Jakarta just after takeoff. David Curley has the latest on those recovery efforts there. David, what happened?
Well, we don't know yet. What we do know is that 13 minutes into the flight from Jakarta to an island, should have been about a 70-minute flight, the aircraft went down into the Java Sea. What's interesting, what is puzzling, what's the mystery about this at this point is that at that altitude, 13 minutes into the flight, all of a sudden the locator transmission from this 737 MAX 8 stops, and then the plane plunges into the sea. The question is, was that a complete and total failure because it was so immediate of mechanical or something in the aircraft itself? Or was there something else? Because it was so sudden, one can't rule out terrorism, that a bomb can cause that sudden kind of failure as well. So we really don't have any idea what brought down this aircraft. All we're hearing from Lion Air, which was a low-cost operator in Indonesia, is that the aircraft had an issue on Sunday. All they would say was it was a technical issue and that it was repaired according to Boeing guidelines, and that it was put back into service Monday morning for this 6:30 flight, 6:20-ish, that it took off from Jakarta. 189 on board. They have found human remains. They have found personal effects. They have not found the black boxes yet. They have not found the wreckage of this 737. This is a brand new plane, Diane. They got this aircraft back in August. It's been in service for just 2 months. It's the latest version of the 737 from Boeing. It has some new engines that are more fuel efficient on it. Boeing is offering to help in this investigation. They want to know if it's something with the aircraft or something else. That's the latest that we know so far from the Indonesians. They say their search and rescue is going to continue for 24 hours. It is, of course, the middle of the night there now.
All right. Our David Curley covers aviation for us. We appreciate it, David. A lot of questions still left to be answered there. On a much lighter note, now let's go over to the royal tour, shall we? Harry and Meghan are now in New Zealand addressing mental health, a big issue for them, after Meghan gave a very powerful speech on feminism. And the very lucky James Longman has been traveling with the royal couple, and he has the latest for us. James?
Hello, Diane. I've spoken to you from a few different places on this trip, but this is the first time I've got into a boat. Now, we are in Wellington, New Zealand, and we're in this royal tour, and we never really get out and about, so we thought we'd change that. We'd show you a little bit of this beautiful city. They say it's the southernmost capital in the world. They also call it Windy Wellington, and thankfully we're not having to deal with that at the moment. But Meghan and Harry are here, that's why of course we're here, and they're meeting with young people at a cafe to talk to them about mental health initiatives. I spoke to you from Bondi Beach in Australia, where they were doing similar things, and so that's a massive theme for Meghan and Harry of this tour. And then they're heading by chopper over to Abel Tasman National Park for the white sand and beautiful beaches and rainforests over there. Again, conservation, a big theme for Meghan and Harry on this tour. And finally, they're going to be meeting some of the people behind Lord of the Rings, that incredible movie filmed here in New Zealand. They'll be meeting 2 orcs from that movie, or people dressed up anyway as orcs. And so jam-packed day again, but I can't think of another city I would prefer to be in right now. Diane?
Poor unfortunate James Longman with the hardest assignment around, for sure. All right, and finally, apparently there was a baseball game and some team from Boston won. I guess we'll get the details on that from Kana Whitworth.
Hey, Diane. So Dodger Stadium is pretty empty right now, but I have to tell you, it was rocking last night, especially with Boston Red Sox fans singing Sweet Caroline after the team wins their 4th World Series title in 15 seasons. A storied franchise now bringing the trophy back home to Boston. The mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, calling for the city to queue up the duck boats. It's time to celebrate. Now, this game was led by Game 4 hero Steve Pearce. He had 3 home runs in less than 24 hours. And he's new to the team. He was traded from Toronto to the Red Sox in June. Quite a journeyman. He was also crowned World Series MVP.
This has been the funnest year of my life.
It was J.D. Martinez with a solo shot to center in the 7th, padding Boston's lead. After the game, we ran onto the field to catch up with some of the guys. Here's what they had to say.
Everybody wants to step up. Everybody wants to be, the guy and stuff like that. But I feel like when you get to this point, you don't even care who hits the home run, who gets the hit. As long as someone does it and you're able to just get the win.
So Steve Pearce is actually a lifelong Red Sox fan. His dad grew up in Rehoboth, just outside of Boston. So the whole family is Red Sox fans. And I spoke with his dad after the game, and he said to see his son in the Red Sox uniform and then watch him win MVP was absolutely a dream come true. But Diane, I have to tell you, everyone was kind of joking that maybe the biggest win was all of us staying awake after that epic 18-inning game on Friday, the longest in World Series history. And let me just show you one other thing. My producer Jenna got me this trusty hat. So World Series champs, Boston Red Sox. You know, I moved here from Boston, so I guess I get to wear this, right, Diane?
Kana, I think you look much better in the ABC hat. You should remove that hat immediately, I think. Never mind that I'm a Yankee fan. That has nothing to do with any of this. But that does it for us today on ABC News Live. Thanks for watching The Debrief. Remember, you can catch our headlines all day long at abcnews.com or at your ABC News app. For ABC News Live, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for watching. Go Yankees.